Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Gameplay Reviewed, and in this episode we will be looking at Trusty, who is a DMG rank and he is playing Dust 2. There wasn't actually too many mistakes from Trusty this game individually, as I can't really talk about the problems in areas such as teamwork or strategies because this is matchmaking and we all know how bad the teamwork is in matchmaking most of the time. So I would leave that area to a demo with communication over the top. But the first point I want to make is crossing double doors on CT side. As you can see, he's being hit multiple times crossing because it's not being smoked. And from the terrorist point of view, it's really easy. Secondly, this not being smoked means he can just count how many people are crossing, so the terrorists already know how many people are playing B in the early round. Most of the time you should only really have one player in B, but sometimes depending on the strat you can have two, so it would be useful to smoke it by bouncing it off the spawn box and walking through it, or just bouncing it off the wall in front of the doors so they can't see how many cross. I'm not saying to do this every round because you shouldn't be, but on rounds that you know it's likely the terrorists will have an AWP by following their economy. Also, another useful way is just to use a grenade instead. A smoke in my opinion is much more important, so using it at the start of the round is quite costly. Also, if no one else is smoking the cross and you are playing B alone, it's useful for you as you shouldn't be using your smoke to get across the doors because you will need it for B tunnels. So either the person playing the rotator role or the mid player should be smoking the doors. As an example, if I'm the mid player on my team, which is a lot of the time, I'll just smoke it off fast from my spawn and then flash mid and take an aggressive peek. I also want to mention that this is just how I think it should be for a really standard CT side Dust 2, as it's matchmaking. Actual team games in PCWs and scrims will be quite different and vary a lot. So on that point of a basic setup, it should be one on B, one playing mid who can then fall off to B, and then you have this free roam rotator player who has the freedom to literally be almost anywhere on the map from mid to long. He's basically just a support player who is anywhere that he's needed most on the map, be that on long, helping A from ramp or goose. He could also push short, or just play CT or mid doors. And then you have your standard one in pit, or playing long somewhere, and one on A. The reason I want to talk about this is because the position of Trusty in some rounds on his CT sides were a slight problem. Right now we have one player in B watching the B tunnels. Trusty is right now also on the B side of the map in mid, so technically he is the mid player and the Zend guy is playing the role of rotator. But he is entirely committed to holding middle doors as the majority of the terrorists are mid, so really this setup is actually quite perfect to deal with that now. The problem here is now that Trusty moves into B, even though there's already a player watching B tunnels from the back of the site, instead of helping his player in middle. Now that that player in mid is dead, Trusty should be moving back to watch middle, either from the window above the site or from the door, to stop the B split, but instead he focuses entire attention on B tunnels. And then the outcome is inevitable because they just overrun the site from both directions. It's just a standard B split tactic. So really you shouldn't ever have two players in B watching tunnels unless you're doing it part of a set strat or an eco round or something like that. If they are overwhelming mid and it's going to be a mid to B split, then you can just fall back to a position like this or play the window or even on here. If you do have a player and your rotator player is close to doors like Trusty had, then it's better to play a closer angle because then you can help trade kills. Even just play this position here, look into the wall so you don't get flashed, and then you can just play off sound. He didn't do this kind of stuff every round, it's just that losing one round is what causes 3 rounds to be lost due to having to eco. This is actually from a 3 rounds earlier where he actually does it perfectly. They still have 2 in B though, but the rotator falls off mid and moves to A due to someone dying at A. Trusty then takes his position and covers mid. What happens here is that after covering mid for those few seconds, he then leaves mid for a few seconds to go A, then realises his mistake, so he turns around, and that was all the time that was needed for the terrorists to push through the door uncontested. So really this just comes down to being aware all the time the area of the map that you should be covering depending on your teammate's position. For whatever reason, Trusty is now playing A side every round for the remainder of the CT side, and he's holding long with the AWP. The problem in this clip is just discipline. At this point he just really has to not die because otherwise the terrorist will push long and short at the same time and pincer the remaining A player. I mean, it's not easy to hold long alone when you have a guy in pit with potentially an AWP or an auto sniper like this terrorist had, along with people pushing long with AKs. I mean, trying to kill pit from this position when you're completely exposed is just not smart. The best thing here is probably just to play a passive angle and wait for them to walk into your crosshair. You can wait here and eventually the AWP player will most likely get impatient and want to peek site, so that's a free kill. You just need to be aware of people pushing the site close. I mean, as I said, it's not easy, but peeking aggressively from the site to the pit is quite suicidal. There is a smoke you can do here if you do want to peek aggressively, either with the AWP or M4, which may actually be better. You can throw it in this corner here and then jump down next to this box. While crouching, this smoke is one way, so you'll be able to see down long and they won't be able to see you. Although you can probably be seen if there is an AWP in pit because of the angle that they will be lower down. So this is only really useful if they're actually running up long. But I'll be going over this smoke and many others in my next 2 videos, which will be on Dust 2 anyway. So I'll be showing this one and demonstrate it properly then. So a lot of this video really just comes down to positioning yourself correctly on the map to cover all areas and also just gather information for your team. I think that's all I'm going to cover in this one, just because the T side was actually a bit random. I think he pushed long nearly every round, so I can't really gather much from that. Also, I don't want to make the video too long and boring. So thank you for watching and goodbye.